Hi everyone, and thanks for attending this workshop. My name is Thomas Vezin, and what I'm gonna present to you today is my experience with the installation of a hydrostatic sensor in the village of Gogma. So first of all, I'm going to present to you how we prepared this mission, so the objective that we were trying to achieve, and the choice of sensor to actually do it. Then I will present to you how I installed this sensor, and finally we will go through the results we obtained and how they can be used in PV water pumping systems monitoring. When I arrived in this project in 2019, it was already ongoing and the water pumping system was already installed in Gogma, and it delivers water to roughly 200 people a day. At this time, we already had a model to predict the amount of water that the system could produce, but what we didn't know was the level in the borehole. And the reason why it matters is that if you pump some water, then the borehole water level decreases, and then it costs more energy to pump water because the level is lower. So what we wanted to understand was what was the evolution of the borehole water level with pumping. And that's why we wanted to install a new sensor in the system here in the borehole to measure the water level and then to correlate it with the pump flow rate. Now that we know what we want to do, let me explain to you how we chose the sensor. So the question we had to ask ourselves were, what precision do we need? How do we want to collect data? Do we want to do it remotely or to send someone to do it? And what price can we afford? So since our project was for research, we wanted quite a high precision up to the centimeter. It was not, of course, it was not mandatory, but since it's a precision that we can achieve, then let's just do it. For the data collection, we already have a contract with someone in Burkina Faso to collect the data every 2 weeks also. So we didn't need remote access to it, and we just went with a manual solution. And finally, the cost that we could afford was roughly 100 euros, which is also quite high. So we could afford a high-end sensor, and we chose the DCX22 from Keller. And as you can see here, so here is the hydrostatic sensor. This is just some additional electronics that's inside water. And then you have a long wire of 30 meters, which ends with a connection on which you can plug your computer to collect the data. And that's it. As for the place we wanted to install the sensor, here is pictures from the village of Gogma. And this is our pumping system with solar panels here and the big tank right here, so you can see here. And finally, the fountain at which the inhabitants can collect the water. So here is how we installed the sensor. We needed to open the borehole and to put the long wire inside so that the borehole would reach as deep as possible inside the water. And so it was almost at the level of the pump, a bit before the pump. And as you can see, we measured very carefully the length of the cable here, because we need to know how deep the sensor is to convert precisely the pressure it measures into a water level from the ground level. And as you can see, it's very easy to plug in this sensor because it's only here you can plug a computer. So it's in the air and you can manipulate it easily. So the hypothesis we wanted to check was whether our borehole followed Jacob's equation or not. As you may know, Jacob's equation is a famous equation of hydrology that relates the pump flow rate with the water level of the borehole. So it is usually assumed that the variation is quadratic. So there's a constant, which is called static water level, which is the water level without any pumping. And then you have a linear term that's called aquifer losses and a quadratic term that's called borehole losses. And we, based on the data collected by the sensor, we fitted those 3 parameters and we found the values here with a very, very good agreement with the measured data, because the R squared is almost 1 and the norm root mean square error is less than 3%. As you can see from a representation, it's also in very good agreement with the measured, so you can see it by eye, except for those bits, but it's not very important to us. So overall, we say it's in excellent agreement with measured data. And now that we are confident that we can model that we can correctly model the borehole water level, we may ask ourselves if those parameters are constant with time or not. And the answer, of course, is not, because, for instance, between the dry and the humid season, you will have a change in the static water level, because if it's dry, then the aquifer is less filled with water, so the water level is a bit below its natural value. Then you may have good years and bad years, which means years with a lot of rain and years without it. And in that case, you have also annual variation. And finally, if you pump too much, or if the borehole clogs itself, then you can have also a secular variation of the parameters. So you have 3 different time scales. And I underwent a literature review to try to understand how much these effects could be. And we estimated that roughly the parameters could change from 0 to 3 times the nominal value. So that was reported based on the existing literature on the subject. And now that we know exactly how much our parameters can change, we may ask ourselves, how do these variations change the pumping capacity? So we run some simulations, and here you can see the percentage of variation of the pumped volume when the parameters change. So this curve here is for mu0 change, kappa 0 change, and static water level changes. And as you can see, the only real effect is the one of the static water level, which means that if the aquifer depletes, then you may see some changes in the quantity of water you are able to pump. And that's actually the main message of our study, which is that if you can measure the solar irradiance and the pump volume, which you can do from the distance actually with just a remote controller, then you may have access to the static water level, which means that you can check whether the aquifer is being depleted without going there. And that's really important because for these villages, the access is really a key issue because they are very remote. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough data to go through this analysis ourselves, so this will have to be done later on when we find some time. So thank you for your listening and have a good day.